Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are when you see this video. Thanks for joining me, Dorothea, on Through an Orthodox Christian Lens. It is August 30th, 2025, Saturday. I have a lot of spiritual information to share with you today that I just found out last night and this morning, reading a book I got a few weeks back. This is the book. Let me see. Russia Before the Second Coming. I'll be reading out of that book, and I'll also be reading out of my old, you can see I've used this many times, but Ultimate Things, Orthodox Perspective on the End Times. So, really crucial information here. Let me do one thing. There's two things I want to show you. So the first thing is I'm just going to give this as the preface to what's going to be happening in this episode. It is back in July, Russian Supreme Court outlaws international Satanist movement. Of course, at the end of the article it says, well, that movement doesn't exist. But I think what they mean is satanic actions and attacks against the Russian Orthodox Church, which since this came out of Moscow Times. Now, I forgot to put this up, so I'm going to have to go in and do it here in a minute. But the people may wonder why that they outlawed Satanism in Russia. Well, the Russian Orthodox Church is the Russian Orthodox faith is what is the pillar of Russia in the spiritual sense. Now, next thing I'm going to go on to is I'm just going to show you this one thing that was just posted on X, and unfortunately I don't have it up yet, so I got to bring it up and I got to go to my profile to show you. So Khalil Sayegh said the churches in Gaza have decided not to evacuate their buildings in Gaza City. Christians are choosing to remain, even if it means risking their lives rather than leaving their churches. And as you know, I reported on that the other day. From the Patriarch of Jerusalem and the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem. So this is what the J, remember J's, I'm using for the JEWS, and then ISRAEL for ISRAEL. The J Policy Center said this the other day, and Tucker Carlson responded to it, but I'm going to read what it says. This is very ominous. Important to understand, if Gaza Christians believe ISRAEL will not conduct its war in Gaza City, they are mistaken. They have implanted themselves in a battlefield. They are part of the battle. If they are looking for martyrdom, well, that's chilling, ominous, and right from the spirit of the Antichrist against his people, his church. Okay, this is really important stuff. I wanted to show you that right off the bat because it's revolving around this spirit of the Antichrist and tools of the enemy that he's using against Christ's Orthodox Church. In this segment, I'm going to be talking about the Russian Church because, as I said, I'm reading Russia Before the Second Coming, and very vital stuff. So, I'm going to start here. The reason why I find this so important is that I did not hear this or know of this when these particular attacks were going on, but they started in 1992. Let's see, where did I put that? Okay. Forgive me for being so not ready. Okay, I'm going to center on some specific stories here. They were news stories. They were important that were coming out. Now, this is after the fall of the Soviet Union, because the Soviet Union fell in 1991, they say officially. There were some elders that thought there was going to be terrible catastrophes in 1992. But in any case, I'm going to give you a few stories here that so 1992 and 1993 were marked by a particular outburst of demonic activity. Valery Avdeev's School of Ghosts announced a grand parade of 7 million armed ghosts on Red Square on October 22nd, 1992 in St. Petersburg from November 12th to the 15th, 1992, in symposium of representatives of extraterrestrial civilizations and magicians took place. So, let me just go on here, give you an idea what's going on. So they're talking about, let's see, competing among themselves. Okay, so they had South Korean sectarians propagated the end of the world in Russia, scheduled by them for October 28, 1992. That's their opinion. Competing among themselves were the Hare Krishnas, the, I can't pronounce this, Bogorodichny Center, and the White Brotherhood. Great, in quotes, Zia Solomonia, also known as Leva Shova, declared herself to be Jesus Christ, and her abilities were promoted by the press and television. Of course, we didn't know this because we weren't really reporting very much of what was going on in Russian society at this time. In the U.S., it was whatever we get from us Americans, we do not get much information outside of what we're given, spoon-fed from our media. Anyway, let me go on. Okay, so the trip to Israel, the creation of the White Brotherhood, and the appointment, quote-unquote, of the end of the world on November 11th, or the 24th, if you do by old calendar, 1993, all culminated a few days before this with the desecration of the iconostasis in the Church of St. Sophia in Kiev, in the Moscow Cinema Concert Hall. Oktyabr Anatoly Kasparovsky, who decided to try his hand in politics by supporting the LDP of V.V. Zhirinovsky, was replaced by the Russian sorcerer Yuri Tarasov. So it goes on and it's talking about basically sorcery, witchcraft, things that are of the occult were being marched out and becoming a thing in 1992-93. Now, this is on April 5th, 1993. On the day of Holy Pascha, that's Easter, in Optina Pushtin Monastery, Hierarch Vasily Rozyakov, monks Trofim and Ferapont were killed. The murder weapon, a sword, quote-unquote, was about 60 centimeters long, inscribed with the words Satan and the number 666. Senior investigator for particularly important cases, A. Vasiliev, stated that the martyrs were killed by stabbing blows to the chest, back, armpits, and groin. The knife thrusts were executed with extraordinary professionalism and deliberately not very deep so that the victim would bleed out slowly. During the search of the murderer, N.N. Averin, a torn Bible, A torn Bible and Gospel were found, along with books on Satanism and black magic. It became known that Averin had traveled to Kiev seeking out Satanists there. On Pascha Day in 1990, he had attempted rape. Quote, "I had a desire to take revenge on God through his servants, the monks," said the Satanist. "I constantly heard a voice that said, 'Monks are Satan's enemies. If you don't do this now, we will lose the war between God and Satan.' During interrogations, Averin told that he began hearing voices," these are in quotes, "first identifying himself as a robot, then as Satan's brother. The voices commanded him to kill clergymen. On this basis, the criminal board of the Kaluga Regional Court ruled that the Satanist killer is not subject to criminal liability and determined to apply compulsory medical measures to him, placement in a psychiatric hospital under strict observations." So, meanwhile, the pressure from Satanists is intensifying. On the night of July 18th, exactly 2 months after the murder in Optina Pustin, ritual signs of the Church of Satan were discovered on the walls of the Department of Church, Charity, and Social Service of the Moscow Patriarchate, and the word death written next to them in English. Similar signs were found on the nearby church of St. Sergius of Radunas. Similar incidents have already occurred in many Moscow churches. So this is an official document from the Council of the Union and Orthodox Brotherhoods. This was stated May 7, 1993. There are frequent cases of break-ins into churches where tabernacles containing the holy gifts are stolen for subsequent desecration. Inside churches, Orthodox shrines are desecrated, crosses are broken, churches are set on fire, and churches have been burned in the Donskoy Monastery and in Sergeyev Posad. On the walls of churches and monasteries, one can often find Kabbalistic and other satanic symbols and inscriptions, such as pentagrams, 5-pointed stars, cross triangles, 6-pointed stars, 3 sixes, the sign of the Antichrist, images of Satan himself with horns, a hand with 2 raised fingers representing horns, and other symbols and signs representing the devil of the Antichrist. Desecrations are regularly committed in Orthodox cemeteries. Dead animals, cats, dogs, birds, etc. are crucified on grave crosses. Satanists openly mock with orthodoxy our shrines. The Kazan icon of the Mother of God was publicly desecrated on Red Square. There have been multiple attempts to desecrate the cross monument in the chapel of the Derzevnaya, icon of the Mother of God, on the site of the Church of the Christ the Savior's Cathedral in Moscow. There have also been numerous attempts on art clergy. Let us recall only some facts that have received widespread publicity. In the mid-1970s, Bishop Methodius was ritually murdered in Omsk. Priests were killed with signs of ritual. Father Alexander Min, Abbot Seraphim Shlikov, Abbot Lazarus Solinshko, with signs of pre-mortem torture. There were attempts to kill Father Nikolai Guryanov on Zealot Island, Pskov region, where the killers openly declared that they were devil worshippers. Last year, Archimandrite Anastasi was hanged in his cell at the Trinity Sergius Lavra. Very recently, there was a clear attempt to kill Archimandrite Inokenti in the Joseph Volokov Monastery. All these crimes remain unsolved. Graves were desecrated. This is in November 1993. Graves were desecrated at the Nikolo Arkhangelsk Cemetery in Moscow. This is quote, toppled monuments, broken tombstones uprooted and overturned Orthodox crosses. A total of 89 graves were desecrated. Judged by the scale and severity of the damage, there were more than just 2 or 3 perpetrators, and they operated under the cover of night for quite some time. The nature of the desecration, in particular the overturned crosses, clearly indicates not just primitive hooligan motives, but a ritual basis for their actions, the symbol of the enemy of mankind. 666 was inscribed on some gravestones and not even washed away by the rain, once again revealing the dirty hand of Satanists. December 30, 1993, Deacon Sergei Milkalev of the St. Nicholas Cathedral in Dushanbe was shot dead after participating in the consecration of the 201st Russian Motor Rifle Division the day before. January 1994, on the night of the Feast of the Baptism of the Lord, the cross erected on Poklonyana Hill in Moscow in memory of the warriors and martyrs for the Russian land was cut down. February 3rd, 1994, a brutal murder took place on the grounds of the St. Daniel Monastery in Moscow. The body of a 44-year-old worker of the patriarchal residence was discovered in the basement under the monastery workshop. His abdomen was stabbed 4 times, and his head was literally smashed with something heavy. Never heard any of these things, did you? Because, I mean, if you're in America or in some Western country, you probably didn't hear too much of this at all. Now, these are the incidences in the Holy Land. Starting from the 1970s to 80s in Jerusalem, there was a noted rise in psychiatric illnesses among visitors, who usually imagine themselves to be some biblical characters. Psychiatrists suggest that this is the result of an emotional shock from encountering the holy places of Jerusalem. 20% of the patients had no prior psychiatric disorders, mainly believers who do not observe religious practices. This usually begins at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, on Golgotha, and along the Via Dolorosa. Muslims, Soviet, immigrants, and Protestants are almost never affected. Those who become ill usually recover upon returning home. Strange, huh? Let me get into what we learned, the incidences that happened there. So we have from the statement of Archbishop Diodorus of Hierapolis, now Patriarch of Jerusalem. At that time, he was the Patriarch in 1970, to the UN Commission on Human Rights, April 14, 1970. This is what he brings up. The Greek Orthodox Church of the Nativity of John the Baptist in Ein Karim, near Jerusalem. After the windows, doors, benches, and icons were broken, the roof was also destroyed. Refuge and garbage were brought into the church and scattered around the building. The graves were dug up, and the body of the parish priest and the bodies of others buried around were thrown out of the graves, with bones and remains scattered among piles of garbage on the street, and the place was turned into a public latrine. The Church of the Prophet Simeon, the elder, in Kadmon, Jerusalem, on March 5th, 1970, Jays, remember that's Jews, Jays attacked this ancient monastery with the intent to steal valuable icons, but although they broke down the door, the ingenuity of the abbot prevented the robbery. The walls around the monastery were destroyed, the stones taken away, and the monastery courtyard was turned into a playground for Jay children and a meeting place for teenagers. The Church of St. Michael in Jaffa, this church, known for its ancient icons, was burned down by ISIS. And around the remaining structure, 4 walls and a roof, nightclubs and bars were built. The churchyard served as a meeting place for lovers, and Orthodox residents of Jaffa avoid passing by this place. Baizan, the Greek Orthodox Church, Bet Shean. This sacred place was desecrated by ISIS, who turned it into a latrine. The Greek patriarch was forced to build a stone barrier in front of the entrance to prevent Israelis from desecrating the church. Oops, I said that. ISIS. Caesarea, among the historical ruins, was a building belonging to the Greek Patriarchate, the Jerusalem Patriarchate. It served as a monastery and church. The ISIS destroyed it, leaving no trace. The Greek Orthodox Cemetery on Mount Zion. Israeli authorities removed the stones, smashed the crosses, and dug up the bodies buried in this old cemetery. The Patriarchate is now restoring the damage, possibly has already restored it. Remember, this was back in 1970. They're reporting this. Insults to priests. We already know about them being spat on. Obscenities said to them. Bishops and nuns were insulted. As we know, we've heard that. That's apparently still going on, as you know. Indecencies. The ISIS in the Holy Land are a catastrophic threat to all religions, sanctities, ideals, and morals, committing sacrileges. That's what the Patriarchate of Jerusalem is saying, the Orthodox one. A few years ago, 3 monks were killed in the Greek monastery in Nablus, ancient Shechem, in the Gorneski convent, Russian Orthodox Church. 2 nuns were killed under still unclear circumstances. In the Russian ecclesiastical mission near the Sea of Galilee, in the pool where the waters of the spring of St. Mary Magdalene flow, on June 29, 1987, the body with deep head wounds of higher monk Methodius, because that's what they described it as, the Methodius from 1955 to 1987, he was alive. The secretary of the Russian ecclesiastical mission in Jerusalem was discovered. On Maundy Thursday, on Holy Week in 1990, armed fanatical Jays from Russia seized the St. John Hospitaller, owned by the Greek Orthodox Church, located right next to the Holy Sepulchre. In the same year, 1990, Jerusalem Patriarch Diodorus was affected by a gas attack. Taking advantage of this, the Jay authorities assigned the Holy One a guard who, regardless of his will, accompanies him everywhere, including in the churches of God, armed and wearing hats. I'm not sure what wearing hats is supposed to mean, but May 2nd, 1992, as reported by the Athens newspaper ENA, May 6, 1992, at 1:30 a.m., a monstrous crime occurred in the Church of the Resurrection of Christ. 2 men entered the church and headed toward the site of Golgotha. They descended the steps and approached the altar, and then one of them took a candlestick and began smashing everything in front of him. He also tried to break the crucifix, but was unable to do so. This was already the second attack on Golgotha. During the previous attack, 2 months prior, the icon of Mother of God was desecrated. According to the press reports, the perpetrators broke the tabernacle with the holy gifts and destroyed sacred vessels from 2 altars at Golgotha. And they have another statement from the representative of the Christian churches of Jerusalem on May 4th. And they talk about their horror and outrage and condemn this vile, unprecedented act of vandalism in the entire history of the church. An hour and a half after the incident at Golgotha, that was their quote. Now this is an hour and a half after the incident of Golgotha, an attack took place on the Holy Trinity Church in Hebron, belonging to the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia. The monks were beaten and the church itself was robbed and desecrated. According to reports from the Izzy Press, the head of the Department of Relations with Christian Churches at the Ministry of Religious Affairs, Yuri Moore, stated that the churches themselves, not the state, are responsible for the security of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and other Christian holy places. Representatives of the Ministry of Religious Affairs emphasized that it is unfair to blame the state for what happened. However, there are serious concerns that the holy places will come under the jurisdiction of the Izzy Ministry of Tourism, and the reason here, of course, is not only financial gain. They go on, and this is Georgios Moustakis, a Greek theologian and sociologist who has been researching the sacrileges occurring in the Holy Land in recent years, believes that the attempt to desecrate Golgotha is just part of a larger scenario. The scenario has victims, 3 monks who were killed by unknown persons. In all cases, the perpetrators are either not caught, not named, or declared insane. The same scenario includes threatening phone calls to monks and verbal insults to Patriarch Diodorus, who was in at that time. And then we have a quote from Archimandrite Ion Krestiankin, Pskov Pechersky Monastery, June 7th, 1992. Do you think it was by chance that the Lord allowed the great sanctities at Golgotha and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre to be desecrated? Doesn't this foretell that the decisive period of the devil's struggle against God and his Christ is near? Be careful, dear ones, that no one deceives you. Hold fast to orthodoxy. Carefully preserve the grace given to us by God. Be vigilant and pray. Quietly perform your work for your salvation, according to the commandments of the Lord, the guidance and the teachings of the Holy Fathers. Do not forget, but ponder the words of the Lord. If the Son, therefore, shall make you free, ye shall be free indeed. There is true freedom. There is salvation. There's a lot of stuff in here that I could tell you, but I just read that one part because you see how thick this is. Because, I'm reporting on what's going on now, the attacks now, and what that's been like for the church. But we see that this kind of stuff has been going on for ages, decades and decades and decades. And I'm going to show you a clip. So now that we see that the evil one has been attacking Christ's church, the Orthodox Church, globally for many years, and that's the spirit of the Antichrist is all over this, And so I'm going to show you a clip that I saw the other day from Dialogue Works. I want to hear what the two Larrys have to say. Colonel Larry Wilkerson and Larry Johnson. Okay? Let me see if I can bring that up. Okay, listen to what is said here.
I think there is a current within Trump's electric brain that does want to stop this and stop it in a way that gives him more credit than discredit. And I think there are people arrayed around and behind Trump, and very powerful people. They were arrayed behind and with Biden as well, who don't want that to happen, just as Larry said.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, I think, and this has been some research I've done in the last week or so, congruent with another group I belong to, there are about 50 to 60 million dispensationalists in this country. We call them fundamentalists. And their interpretation of the Rus is that they are the soldiers of the Antichrist.
Mm-hmm.
And we discount these people at our peril. These people have captured a lot of the more important parts of our Congress, some of the executive branch, and a couple of people on the Supreme Court, in my considered view. And Opus Dei, for example, I think sees great interest. They don't necessarily agree religiously with these people. They have a different interpretation of the end times and the rapture and all the rest of that garbage. But they are allied with them, just as Trump is exploiting them, and people around Trump, like Stephen Miller and others, are deeply exploiting them. They are an integral part of their political power. And when you try to explain why a lot of Americans seem to have a vivid distaste for, even a hatred for Russians, I think you have to poke into that a little bit and see where it comes from. I wouldn't be surprised, for example, that some of Lindsey Graham's ire doesn't come from that. I know Ted Cruz's ire comes from that, because as we know from the interview with Tucker Carlson, Ted Cruz bases his security policy decisions on the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. And that's really what we're talking about.
Yeah, this demonization of Russia goes back probably 900 years or more.
Yeah.
With and Vladimir Putin pointed this out, and I think he was absolutely correct, that the papal envoy went to Russia to try to persuade the ruler Ivan, that we know as Ivan the Terrible, to persuade Ivan to join the Catholic faith. And he refused. He says, we are Orthodox Christians. Now, the biggest difference between Orthodox Christianity and Catholicism is the Catholicism's like a rigid pyramid. Got a pope at the top. It's got this entire structure below it. It's very much a hierarchical, authoritarian system. The irony is that the Orthodox Christian Church is nothing of the sort. They will acknowledge certain people as having great power as a spiritual leader, but they're not a hierarchy at all.
I just need to insert something here. Neither one of them are Orthodox, so they don't quite understand everything. But I will correct Larry here that we do have a hierarchy in Orthodoxy, but it's collegiate. It's all bishops are equal. They just have their own jurisdictions. They don't overstep. They're not supposed to overstep others. And the ecumenical patriarch is supposed to be equal to all, but he just is like, he would speak for the churches, kind of like Peter did, but he doesn't have any power over the other patriarchs. So it's more collegiate than it is authoritarian, like he was saying about the Catholic Church.
They're actually much more democratic, and so that plays a part into this. And again, just the fact that you've got this Schofield Bible nonsense that will portray Russia as the Antichrist, when compared to countries, if you did a survey of countries in the world with which countries have the most professing Christians, which countries have the most Christians attending religious services, Russia would be in the top. That surpassed the United States.
Okay. So let's go over what was said here. Very important. Colonel Wilkerson talked about how there's 50 million evangelical or fundamentalist Christians that believe that Russian army are the army of the Antichrist. My first thought on that, other than vehemently disagreeing with that, was these people are so far separated from Christ's established Orthodox Christian Church since 33 AD that they cannot recognize where the true church is, and it's right there. They can't see it. They've been deceived. This is how I'm seeing it. That's through my Orthodox Christian lens. They have been deceived by the evil one through false doctrines, the Schofield Bible, the pre-rapture stuff, their dispensationalism, their view of the Kylism, these 1,000-year of belief of ruling of Christians on earth, and then the end. That was said to be a heresy way back at the beginning in one of the first councils, ecumenical councils. So they don't understand. They are misinterpreting a lot of things. And this is what happens when you try to read Revelation without the instruction and traditional and original interpretation of what Revelation says about the end times and the last days of the Christians and having to face the Antichrist. So that's what I had to say on that. But I also think that's what I'm going to read. A couple things through here in this Ultimate Things. I'm just going to read you a little bit, because Russia is basically the beacon, like the lighthouse by the sea that's guiding Orthodox Christianity at this time. It was after the fall of the Byzantine Empire, the Russian Empire took over, okay, as the last one, okay, before the world of Antichrist. Although I have read that it's going to still be going on during the time of the Antichrist. The Russian Orthodox Church will still be there. I mean, a lot of the degradation at that time, but they're still going to have some believers, and that church. And I was reading that people won't be going to Russia at that time because of. I read one saint that said, if you're in the Slavic lands during the time of the Antichrist, you're more protected. So I'm like, I'm going to. I might be moving if I have to, but at some point. I don't know when, because we don't know when all this is going to happen with the Antichrist and all that. But let me just say this. They're talking about the return of the Tsar. Well, we already know that St. John is going to come in the Constantinople area. And so let's just see what it says for the Russian thing. Regarding the return of a Tsar, Archbishop Theophan of Poltava wrote in 1930, "The coming of the Antichrist draws nigh and is very near. The time separating us from him should be counted a matter of years and at most a matter of some decades. But before..." This is in 1930. "But before the coming of Antichrist, Russia must yet be restored, to be sure, for a short time. And in Russia there must be a Tsar forechosen by the Lord himself. He will be a man of burning faith, great mind, and iron will. This much has been revealed about him." Some people have speculated that was Vladimir Putin. I have no idea. I would assume that maybe he hasn't come yet. I think it's after the war, but in any case, when so many of the predictions of righteous Russian sufferers have come to pass, all their words must take on added importance. A theme repeated by many is that the restoration of Russia will be temporary. It will be a flowering before the end, a brief return to true Christian beliefs and practices, and it will presage a wave of worldwide repentance prior to the appearance of Antichrist. Of course, this lines up with what the elders and Metropolitan Yavadas and the saints have been saying regarding after World War III, because it started to emerge after the fall of the Soviet Union through all of the terror that the Christians went through with that, but repentance had to come about before that, for that to change. And so we see that during the late 90s and then into the 2000s, Russia has been restoring itself. Many monasteries, many churches, thousands, of churches, rebuilding of them, new ones, people returning to the faith. So this is all part of that, I think, part of that revival of coming back from such destruction and of oppression of the spirit of the Antichrist under the Soviet Union. And what I want to say on that is, so World War III, after that, that's when we know that there's going to be that last flowering, as was just said, that will bring, and it's through the Russian Orthodox Church, because they were spreading. The Russian Orthodox Church, if you'll notice, every country, I was doing this years ago, I was just posting a bunch of churches in different countries, and every single country that had an Orthodox church, Cuba, Philippines, Thailand, China, places all over the place you wouldn't even think of, even in Antarctica, they're all Russian Orthodox. So they were making quite headway of spreading the gospel of Christ through the true teachings of the Orthodox Church, and that was stopped through the Bolshevik Revolution. And this has been the Antichrist, the Satan and the evil one does not want obviously orthodoxy to spread. So that's what's been happening. But I wanted to share that with you. I know this is kind of dragged on. It's a long video, but it's very, very important what I was reading, and I wanted to share it with you because it seemed so vital and so important, especially what's been going on. So you get a more idea of history of what's been going on. And so the idea that the Russians are the army of the Antichrist, if you just look at the fact that it's been attacked by Satan and his demons, and through the tools of these people who are vulnerable and influenced by them through occult and all this other stuff, and their own beliefs in other gods that aren't real, you would question that a lot, because it seems the most persecuted church over the history has been, for the most part, the Orthodox Church. So that's the way I look at it. That's what I'm seeing. You all can share your thoughts. I hope you do. And I really appreciate you watching and listening, and hope this was very informative to you. If it was informative to you and you got a lot out of it, go ahead and share it with others. I would appreciate that. Thanks so much for following my channel. And I hope you're having a wonderful day, afternoon, or evening, or Saturday. Until next time.